Good morning. Hope you enjoyed that keynote with Alec and Subhash. We're excited about web methods and all that hybrid iPaaS can accomplish. Are you ready for TechCon 2025? My name is Dan Ortega. I'm the Network Management SME for the Americas, and I'll be your host today for Track S, Infrastructure Automation and Security. We are currently in session 11, Democratize Automation, Complex IT Automations via Low-Code Workflow Development. We will be covering a lot of ground today, and like you, I'm here to listen and to learn. There's always something that I pick up, but if something's a little fuzzy or nebulous as we go through the presentation, make sure to submit your questions in the chat, as we would like to hear from you. There will be a couple of poll questions, so please answer those as they come in, and also don't forget to provide us with feedback and make comments. We want to know what is on your mind. So we know that you're excited to hear what our experts have to say, so I'm going to turn it over now to our first speaker, who is no stranger to cameras. You might have seen him somewhere, speaking perhaps in, say, LinkedIn or a trade show like Mobile World Congress or YouTube, and of course here at TechCon 2025, a person who really needs no introduction, Raul Gonzalez. Take it away, Raul.
Thank you, Dan. So thank you for that introduction. As you can see, my name is Raul Gonzalez. And today, in this session, we're going to talk about how we can democratize the access to automation. So we have this kind of complex IT environments where we need to integrate tools together. We need to create some automations or even orchestrate different automations. But maybe we don't have the skills, we don't have the time to create these automations, and maybe we need to depend on the third-party teams, and we have this kind of friction. This is what this session is about. We're going to see how we can democratize the access to automation, where the SMEs, the experts on the solutions like cloud providers, OpenShift, any other kind of infrastructure, network, any kind of solution, we can empower the people to create their own automations. As Dan mentioned, my name is Raul Gonzalez. I work as a worldwide network automation expert. I've been working for IBM for around 5 years now, but during my whole business life, I've been working with management and monitoring solutions. And without further ado, let's have a look at what we're going to see today. So, everyone knows it's no secret that automation is key for businesses today. We need to automate. And why do we need to automate? Because of the gains that we get with automation. It's not only that we are having or we're struggling to get people that are experts on this field. Once we have these people are very, very busy and they have a lot of tasks to do. And one of the tasks is to make all these tools work together better and seamlessly. But in order to do that, it's complex. We need to understand how we can integrate these different tools together, which are the protocols, which are the technologies. So we all know that we want to automate more, as we can see here. The problem is that how do we do that? And when we talk about technologies that we're using in businesses, there are so many. As you can see here, this is a very, very, very small selection of some of the main technologies that we're going to use in our environments. From solutions like GitLab, infrastructure as code, the very well-known now IBM acquisition HashiCorp that includes Terraform or even Vault, to other technologies like cloud providers, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, IBM Cloud as well, to other kind of infrastructure like OpenShift or even Kubernetes or any of the Kubernetes environments running in clouds like IKS, AKS. And then we have other tools like Slack, like Teams, like WebEx, like monitoring solutions like you can see here, like Splunk, SevOne, Dynatrace, Instana. So many tools. And the thing is that these tools cannot work in isolation. They need to be integrated. Typical situation, I have a monitoring solution like Instana, like SevOne, and I want to integrate it with my ITSM solution, ServiceNow. How can I create automatically an incident in ServiceNow when one of these solutions triggers an alert? How can I do it the other way? How can I integrate ServiceNow CIs, CMDB, into these solutions? How can I provision automatically new services in the cloud? regardless if it's in AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, IBM Cloud, automatically? All these are questions that where we need to integrate all these different tools together. But again, we know that automation and orchestration is key. The question here is, how do we do that? And here we can see again why we need to do these automations. Because if we want to do it manually, every time you create there is an alert in one of your monitoring environments, you need to create an instance manually. This is going to take a long time. And in this case, we're talking about a few minutes. What if you want to deploy a new service in your cloud infrastructure, where you need to create the VPC, the security group, the rules, the actual instance? Maybe you have to upload the image first. All these tasks, it will take hours to complete. So if you want to do the whole process, we're talking days, we're talking weeks. If we automate the process, instead of taking weeks to provision this new service, we are talking about minutes, maximum hours. So we see the value of automation. The question again is how we are going to do that. And the question is with rapid infrastructure automation. The thing is that all these people that are trying to use this, create these automations, these orchestrations, sometimes we don't have the skills to create the automations. Maybe we don't know programming languages like Python, Node.js, Go, for example. Maybe we have solutions like Ansible and Terraform, but we need to learn how to use that, how to use the YAML files, how to use infrastructure as code, all these things. Maybe we don't know that. Maybe I'm an expert in a monitoring solution. Maybe an expert in cloud. I don't have those skills. I don't want to depend on other people, on other teams to create these automations. Typical situation happens when we talk with customers. They always tell us, the problem is that I know that I need to create this automation, but if I have to create it, it's going to take months, and I don't have time to do that. So what I will do is send the requirements to my development team that will create the automation for me. But obviously, this team is not an expert on what I do. I need to explain, I need to have a lot of training sessions with them to teach them what I need to do. And obviously they will not understand, so there's going to be a lot of back and forth, there's going to be a lot of friction. At the end, they're going to come up with some kind of automation that is not exactly what I need. So again, some back and forth. At the end, once we manage to create the actual automation, the workflow that I need, is 6 months later, requirements have changed, we have to start again. And this is something very, very common. How can we remove this barrier? How can we remove the friction? How can we empower these people, the SMEs, the experts on clouds, on infrastructure, on monitoring, on any other kind of tools to create their automation? Well, the answer, as mentioned, is with rapid infrastructure automation, because what we will do is give them a solution that allows them to create the workflows, the automations, using a no-code platform. So basically, it's dragging boxes, creating something in a graphical interface. But something even more important, with out-of-the-box integrations with the tools that they use. What does it mean? The thing is that there are lots of solutions in the market that are no-code, low-code. Basically, you have a graphical interface where you can see the workflows, where it starts, where it ends, with the loops, the conditionals, everything that you can do in a script, you can do it in a no-code solution. But that's not the difficulty. The difficulty is how you interact with the tools that you use. In most of the situations, you will use APIs to interact. And how do you connect with these APIs? And the thing is that it's not difficult, but it takes time. It's time consuming to learn how to use the APIs. First of all, you need to know how to authenticate to this tool. Sometimes you use basic authentication. In some others, you use tokens. In some others, you use the parent token. In some other situations, you use something different. So first of all, you need to figure out for each of the tools that you want to integrate how the authentication works. And once you've done that, you need to learn, you need to study how the APIs and the different API endpoints work, which are the options available, which is the body that you need to send in order to work with this API endpoint, which is the outcome of that API endpoint. So all these things. And you don't have one single API endpoint. You have hundreds, if not thousands of options. So you need to go to the documentation, start learning how to use it. And this is very time consuming. That's why the SMEs that are so busy nowadays, they cannot spend time learning how to do these integrations. That's why those integrations are not built. And that's why the companies cannot progress and can save times because they don't have the time to dedicate to these kind of solutions. However, if we have a solution that comes with out-of-the-box integrations, it's a no-code solution with out-of-the-box integration, meaning that for every action that you can use on the API, you have a building block, you have a box that you can use straight away, where you have in human readable format the settings, the body that you need to send, and you can reuse the outcome for any other future building block that you need to use. What you're doing is democratizing the access to the automation, meaning that the person, that SME, will be able to create the integrations by themselves. As you can see, when we talk about technologies, there are lots of different technologies, from things like monitoring solutions, cloud providers, even other automation solutions, as you will see in a second. Or, for example, one of my preferred ones, one of the main use cases that we use, we facilitate the onboarding of GenAI. In this case, could be with What's Next. So sometimes we want to automate the integration of What's Next with some of the existing tools. It could be with ServiceNow, like a TSM tool solution. It could be with the monitoring solutions as well. How do we do that? With this solution, it's going to be extremely easy to empower the SMEs to leverage GenAI to enhance, to improve the way the systems work. So basically what we're offering here is a no-code, low-code IT orchestration platform where you can create any kind of automation or orchestration. You don't need to rip and replace, as you will see in a second, anything you have. Anything you have today, you can reuse it. Where you have consumable automation, meaning that any kind of automation that we create can be used for third-party tools. You don't need to go manually and click run. What you will be able to do is integrate with workflows with third-party tools, so you can automatically execute these actions. But also something very, very important, we'll create a self-service portal, allowing other people from the company to leverage, to take advantage of the integrations that we create in our platform. All this, we're going to see it in a demonstration in a few minutes. Again, more examples of some of the out-of-the-box integrations that we have. For any kind of action that you want to do in Google or in SolarWinds or in Azure or in Fortinet or in Jira or in Ansible or in NS1, and just pick up some random examples, every action available in the API, you will have a building block very clearly defined what it does, what it needs to be triggered, and what is the outcome. Basically, what we're doing is democratizing the access to automation. Everyone can build their own automations. You don't need specific skills. You can build your automations much faster. A typical question I receive is, okay, I can see that we have integrations with hundreds and hundreds of different vendors. What if I find one vendor that is not certified? Well, as you can see here on this corner, if that's the case, in less than 15 business days, if we have the API documentation, we will integrate that integration for you. Because we want to make sure that anything you need to integrate, anything you need to automate is available for you. So you have all the tools, everything you need to build your own automations. And something very important, what if we are we have existing automation, we have existing things already? Well, if that's the case, you don't need to rip and replace everything. We can reuse your automation. So for example, if you've been playing or you already have Python scripts or Node.js or Go scripts, you don't need to get rid of those ones. We can add them as part of the workflows. If you're using Ansible, even if you're using Ansible AAP, that is the new name of what was part of the Ansible Tower, or if you have HashiCorp for Terraform, you have some recipes there. If you have already some automations, you don't need to get rid of those automations. What you can do is reuse them and make them part of a bigger workflow and actually expand the use case. Sometimes what we use is that imagine that you have some Ansible AAP playbooks that are orchestrating different playbooks there. But imagine that then from there you need to talk to ServiceNow, or you need to talk to a Terraform recipe, or you need to do something else. What we can do is part of the workflow, expand the capabilities of your existing automation. So what's important to understand is that you don't need to get rid of what you have. We can make it better. We can expand it. We can make it easier. We can democratize the access. We can share the access to other people as well. So you can have a centralized location for your automations where you will apply a lot of governance. So basically, you will be able to decide who has access to what. And we don't have to go through the lottery factor. What happens if a person wins the lottery and leaves the company? Not a problem. You have everything centralized, everything controlled. You have governance of all your automations. So don't get rid of anything yet. You can import and reuse anything you have already in terms of automation. And basically, with this solution that we'll show you in a second, you will reduce costs, you will amplify your existing automation, you will make sure that governance is important in terms of security compliance, you will democratize the access of automation, very, very, very important, and you will reduce the operational bottlenecks. So I'm sure that you guys are very excited to see how this looks like in real life. But before that, let's go through some of the use cases, some of the examples of existing customers that are using this solution. So here you can see some of them in terms of compute provisioning, very, very important, audit or remediation of the actual problems of the platform, what we call closed loop automation, or hybrid cloud network configuration. So as you can see, with our solution, we can dramatically reduce the time it takes to perform these actions. Compute provisioning from 20 hours to 18 minutes, remediation from 100 hours to 8 hours, hybrid network configuration from 16 hours to 10 minutes. These are real numbers that our customers are taking advantage because they have deployed automation in their network. For examples, for example, Fortune 10 healthcare company, they wanted to deploy a Meraki SD-WAN plus Wi-Fi. So what we managed to do is to reduce the onboarding time from days to minutes, just orchestrating and automating the deployment of these technologies. For example, a large 5G wireless provider in the US, again, they wanted to automate the provisioning of VMs and configuration management. What we managed to do is automate 95% of all the VMs created by a year. If it takes 1 day to provision a VM and with our solution it takes 5 minutes, imagine how much time we have saved. Imagine how much time the people that work on this team now have. And now they can reuse that time to create much more valuable assets for the company. And not only that, we always have the human error factor. Sometimes when we're doing some things manually, we can add some errors. Obviously, we are humans. If we automate it, we're going to reduce that number of errors. And finally, the Federal Energy Agency, again, we wanted to onboard some infrastructure into a monitoring solution. So what we managed to do is reduce the amount of incidents created just by automating the platform. So you can see these are real numbers and everyone wants more automation. I haven't heard of any customer wanting less automation. Everyone wants more automation. The question is how we're going to apply this automation. Do I have time to learn and try to deploy this automation? Or can I use a solution like rapid infrastructure automation that will help me to reduce the time it takes to build those automations and democratize the access to those ones? Good. So actually for that, I think that we have a poll for you guys. So in this poll, what we want to do is to ask you what is your maturity level for in terms of automation. So I think that the poll is being launched as we speak. So if you guys can spend a few seconds answering that poll, because we want to know about you. We want to know how much automation you guys have implemented in your environment. The answers could be from, there are different answers you can see, but it could be from pretty much nothing to we have everything integrated. We have all our automation requirements defined with governance, with detailed access and granular access, with all the solutions integrated together. On the other side is we haven't started, or maybe we have started playing. Very, very common. What we do is we start playing with some Ansible playbooks, community edition normally. We start working with some infrastructure as code, again, community edition, and some Python scripts that some skilled people have tested. And actually they are working, possibly they are working in production, but they are just running everywhere. So I think that the poll is gonna end soon. So yeah, if you guys didn't have time to reply, please answer now. If not, let's go ahead. And what we can do now is see the actual solution how it looks, because all this looks too good to be true. So let's have a look. So let me jump here. Let me go to this section. So this is the solution that we're talking. This is rapid infrastructure automation. And with this solution, what we're doing is democratizing the access to automation. So what does it mean? Well, let's create a new workflow. Let's call it TechCon 2025. On this workflow is where you're going to create your automation. And you have a start here and an end of the automation. And then here you can do, I always say, anything that you can do on script, you can do it here. I have one of my sons is 14 years old, and he started playing or getting interested in scripting. And I say, look, in a very, very high level, in a very resume way, scripting is all about three things: loops, conditionals, if else, and the actual action. So in a very simplified way, that's why I explained to my son what is scripting. This is exactly what you can do here. If you want to do a loop, you can do it. You can do a for each. You define which is the list inside or the array inside the loop, and you can run things in a loop. If you want to do an if else, you can do it. You define the condition here. If it's true, you execute this branch. If not, this one. And then you have the actions that, for example, one of the actions could be assign a variable a name. Obviously, this is oversimplified because you can have switch case, you can do whiles, you can do lots of different options: break, continue, try catch, lots of different things. Well, everything can be done here. So anything you can do on a script, you can do it here. The difference is that you don't need to know the syntax of the script. And secondly, it's much more visual. Anyone, even without any scripting skills, will understand how this works. Okay. Now, this is good, but this is the typical no-code, low-code platform that anywhere in the market you can find. Where is the real value? The real value is on the options that we have here on the left-hand side. And this is the integrations that we mentioned that we have out of the box. So, for example, imagine that you want to create a VM in one of the cloud providers. Okay? Imagine that you want to do AWS and you want to create a VM. Well, if you want to do it automatically, we have to do is, first of all, see how you have to authenticate in AWS. You need to know which are the API endpoints. You need to know what is the body that you need to send. We're talking about days and days of research. It's going to take a long time to learn how to do it. Here, it's going to be as simple as, first of all, in authentication, let me open a window. I want to create an authentication for AWS. So I'm going to put name, for example, mine. What is the service? Sorry, Amazon Web Services. And here, in order to authenticate, just give me the access key and the secret access key. As simple as that. Once I have the authentication created, that will be the first step. What I have to do is go to the integration I have here and search for the one to create a new VM. So here I can see lots of categories. Which one should it be? Well, I understand that if it's create a VM, it should be EC2. And here I can see all the actions that I can run for my inside this option. I know that this is called instance. So what I can do is, if I search for instance, I can see everything: bundle, cancel, confirm, create, classic instance, describe, lots of different options. And if I go here, run instance, let's go here. And this launches a specific number of instances using AMI for which permission, blah, blah, blah. I think this is the one. So what I can do is drag and drop. And now what I have to do is configure it. That again is the body that we need to send when you want to automate this action. In a real life, you will try and error until you find all the fields that you need. Here is as simple as in human readable format, which is the region. If you have a private link, put it here, and the body with the image ID, the instance type, if you want monitoring or not. For example, let's enable monitoring and everything. Anything you need to define, you have it in this human readable format. Okay? So instead of taking days and days of research to do this, it takes a few minutes. Okay, this is because it's just one provider. Maybe this is easy one. Let's go to another one. What happens with Azure? Not a problem. What we will do is go to Azure. Again, we have to create the authentication for Azure. So we have to come here and define that for Azure, for Azure, what I need is the tenant, application ID, security ID, and subscription ID. So that's what I would need to authenticate. Very simple. And then I will go to the integration. And here, okay, for VM, compute, I guess, makes sense. Here, let's have a look, virtual machines. And here, create a virtual machine. Drag and drop. I can see the options here. And again, you want to give a name, for example, test VM Raul. Parameters, for example, properties, hardware profile. I want to use this size. And again, all the functionality. So again, instead of taking days of your time trying to understand how it works, how to do this integration, now it's taking minutes. It's taking much less time to create the automations. And you can do as many automations as complex as you want. For example, something typical we do is imagine that you have something that is short and sweet, is very useful. Can I reuse it in other workflows? Yes, definitely. Any workflows that you have, you can come here and reuse it. For example, I'm going to create another of the ones I have. This is another workflow that I created. You can just drag and drop. And this will be part of another workflow. So you can see it's very flexible, very powerful. And again, what we're doing is democratizing the access to the automation. Okay, this is great. So how can I run these workflows? How can we empower people to use these workflows? Well, the first thing, you can always click run, which is fine, and this will run through all the steps. But how can I automatically run these workflows? Well, the first way is deploying the workflows. What this will do is we'll create an API endpoint that is externally accessible, that will allow external parties, external tools, to trigger that workflow automatically. So for example, every time there is a new alert or a new incident, for example, in ServiceNow, I want to trigger an action here that goes to the ticket, tries to get more data, and goes back to the ServiceNow ticket to enrich the data. For example, in that case, what we do is publish this workflow as an API endpoint that is external accessible with the body that you define here. You can have as many variables as you want, and this will allow us to trigger this workflow from outside. What about other options? Another option would be a job. Basically, what you would do here is define a schedule for this workflow. Execute this workflow every day, every 2 days, every hour, every minute, every second you define. It's like a cron job that you have in Linux systems. Okay, so if you want to run something in a specific frequency, just create a job. What is the third option? And actually very, very useful, is the automation center. And here is where you give access to other people. So for example, imagine that, yeah, I mean, here I'm using the admin user, that's why I can see so much. Imagine that you have a security team, and the security team always executes the same actions. So what you could do is, instead of having them to execute everything manually, you can give them access to the automation. So automatically can trigger this option. How can we do that? Well, I have here the security section. And here you can see some of the most common actions that these people can do. For example, I want to take a backup of the network devices. I want to block a specific IP address. I want to find a MAC address. For example, let's run this one. It's going to take some time. Let's add a route to the cloud. Let's find an IP address. So basically, instead of having them to do all these steps manually, Now what you're doing is allowing them to execute workflows that someone else created in the background, but you are allowing them to access them. And why is this important? The importance is that these people, these users, in this case is the security team, but it could be any other team, the infrastructure, the monitoring, the operations guy, it could be anyone. What they can do is, instead of spending time trying to execute these actions manually, now they can just run this workflow. This will take a couple of seconds, a couple of minutes to complete, and then reduce the time it takes for them to complete these actions, meaning that now they will have much more time to do much more important things. As usual, what's the problem? Because this sounds like a no-brainer. Okay, this is great. Why are not we doing this? Because you don't have a platform that helps you to build the integrations. You have to do it manually. You have to use Python. You have to use Ansible. You have to use Terraform. You have to use technologies that you don't have skills. I mean, you have skills, definitely you can use those technologies to create the automations. But what if you don't have the skills? Because, for example, if I'm a network engineer, I don't have skills on those technologies. I have skills on my Cisco devices, my Palo Alto, my Checkpoints, my Extreme, my HP, and all these devices. So I don't have the skills to do these automations. That's why solutions like this will help me leverage the automations that I need to make my life much, much easier. So this should finish in a second. In the meantime, I'm going to prepare another demo that I have here. And yeah, what you will see here is basically what is happening is, in the background, we have a workflow that is going through hundreds and hundreds of network devices. Depending on the type of device, it's going to execute one command or another command in order to get this information. It's compiling all this information together. And at some point in the next few seconds, you will see the answer with all the devices and on which interfaces we have found that particular MAC address that we have defined at the beginning. So again, this will take a few seconds, hopefully, and we will see the result. In the meantime, I'm going to show you another demonstration of how this can help our users. Okay, now it's taking a bit longer than expected, typical demo effect. But anyway, let me show you something in the meantime. So for example, typical situation is, actually I can see here, this block here. Actually, let me do something. Let me open a new window while we wait for the other one. Imagine this situation. Imagine that I want to create a new rule on one of my firewalls or security groups in my cloud provider. But again, I don't know Python. I know how I want to do, but I don't know how to automate it. You can click here, you can give access and allow people, like your colleagues, to do it. And actually you can define which cloud. I want to do it in this cloud, and this is actually the port and the IP that I want to block. Just to show you that this is real. This is actual configuration, and you can see that at the very end, this is the last role that we have. We allow this IP address, this port. So as simple as coming here and say, for example, let me change this to port 23, for example, 11111. I want to allow port 23. As simple as click run. Again, in a few seconds, what this will do is create this action. This is what it finished. I now refresh this. You will see that now we have that IP with the port created. So as you can see, from a user perspective, instead of taking a few minutes to do it, now I don't need manually. And this is in case I did it manually. Typical situation what it would do is when you click run, this will create a change request in one of your ITSM solutions, let's say ServiceNow, and then once someone approves that change request, will automatically execute and do it. So of taking minutes, hours to do it is taking a few seconds. Actually, before anyone complains, let me delete this and then let's do it. And actually, this is working. Okay. So what are we doing in the background? What is the workflow? Let's have a look at the actual workflow. So what happened is that someone created this workflow. As you can see, it's very, very simple. What we do is, first of all, we define the cloud. We define different options. And depending on the cloud, we do a switch case. In this case, is if it's IBM Cloud, you will execute this command. If it's AWS, this one, Azure, this one, GCP, this one. What if I have more clouds? No problem. You can come here, define another value. For example, this would be Oracle Cloud. You can define for Oracle, and then for Oracle, you will define the options. As simple as this. But as you can see here, what we did is, okay, for IBM Cloud is actually the one we executed. What we did is execute this action, that is create a rule in a security group. We have defined all these parameters with the body, with everything that we have defined there. How easy was for me to create this? Well, I didn't know anything about the API in IBM Cloud. What I did is I went to the IBM integration. In the integration, I saw everything that was integrated. Obviously, cloud, it looks like it's quite interesting. So let's go to IBM Cloud. And then here, what I would do is VPC, looks like possible answer. Inside of VPC, possibly it would be maybe security group, kind of makes sense. And then in security group, the option would be this one, create a rule for a security group, drag and drop. As you can see, this is exactly the same name. So in a few seconds, okay, maybe if this is the first time you use it, it would take a few minutes, but in a very reduced amount of time, we are not talking about days, we are not talking about weeks, we are talking about seconds or minutes. I managed to understand which was the building block I had to use to automate this action. And again, imagine that you have to do it using Python or using an Ansible playbook. You have to learn how the collection works. We're talking about days or weeks of understanding how it works. If you have to use pure Python, it's going to take definitely days to learn it because it's complex. There is not like a common schema among all the APIs in the world. Everyone is very, very different. So using this solution, we have removed that complexity. Now it's much, much easier to create these automations. I have more examples for you. Let's go to another one. Let me actually close this window. And actually, by the way, this finally finished. In this case, we found the MAC address. Actually, it was not found on the network. That's why it took so long, because we didn't find any device with this MAC address. You can see something that can take hours or even longer to try to execute all these commands among the network. In a few minutes, we managed to get this information. And again, this workflow, we can have a look. It was a little more complex because what we do is through, first of all, we validate the MAC address because we can have different formats. And then once it's validated, depending on the technology that we have, if it's Cisco, if it's SevOne, something else, we'll try to find the MAC address. And once we find it, we add it to the list. Let's have another example. For example, another one, interesting one, is this concept of infrastructure as code. Okay, so imagine the situation where you have infrastructure as code and you define the different settings of your infrastructure using a YAML file. Okay, you have this YAML file. You can see it says updated manually. And you have here a lot of information with the configuration. For example, you can see here that we have the request, we have the limits of specific container of one of our applications. Okay. So imagine the situation. Imagine that you are using something like Turbonomic. Turbonomic is an amazing solution that allows you to optimize those resources. So actually what I can do is go to Turbonomic. What I can do is actually go to search. I want to see in one of my Kubernetes clusters. Actually, I have this solution, this cluster here. Okay, this is our demo system. And what we're doing with Turbonomic is we are monitoring this cluster and is finding some recommendations. Actually, we go to the recommendations. We can see some of them. And actually, one of the ones I'm interested on is this one here. So let me go to the right. Let's go to the details. And look, what we're seeing is that we have on this particular container, we are seeing that actually the requests, we should increase it because we are using much more memory, so we should increase it. And also what we should do is reduce the limit because we're never going to use it. Okay. So Turbonomic is a solution that can monitor your infrastructure, can come with recommendations, and can actually also deploy these recommendations. We can do is execute this action, go to this Kubernetes cluster, and change the configuration. However, this is not always possible in our environment. Why? Because, for example, if we're using infrastructure as code, maybe we have a robot like Terraform that is executed several times on the day to make sure that our resources are using the resources that we have defined on this YAML file. Meaning that if we have a solution like Turbonomic, changing this configuration at some point is going to be reverted back. And this is depending on how your CI/CD pipelines are defined. Maybe you have a source of truth, maybe you have infrastructure as code, maybe you have different ways to deploy resources to your environment. And sometimes we don't allow third-party tools, like it could be Turbonomic, it could be any other else, to deploy these changes. And if you think about that, it's a real shame, because you have a solution such powerful like Turbonomic that is able to come back with all these recommendations, bringing back a reduction of cost, reduction of spend, and actually even improving the performance of the application. But you cannot leverage these recommendations because you cannot automate the action. Well, this is no longer a problem, because with solutions like rapid infrastructure automation, it's going to be very easy for us to integrate solutions together. In this case, we can grab the recommendations from Turbonomic, go directly, in this case, if we have a GitHub, it could be GitLab, it could be any other repository, and automatically update those values. And once we have the values updated, what we can do is go to Terraform in order to apply those changes. So we don't have to wait until the cycle goes through. We can do as soon as it's executed, we can do the changes. Let's have a look. So I think I have it somewhere here. Let's go to one of my workflows that I have here. That is this one. That it basically will do that. Okay, so in order to execute this action, obviously what I can do is automatically from Turbonomic. So when I execute this action, instead of going directly to the cluster, what I will do is talk to Rapid Infrastructure Automation to execute the workflow that I just showed you. I will do it this way. No, I will not do it automatically because otherwise it will be a very short demo. That's why I want to show you. I will run it automatically. And what I can see here is the first things is that you have to tell me which is the action. I can see the action here. Which are the service? This is the service that we are targeting. And what is the limits and the request that we need to send? So if I click execute, run, this is what could happen automatically if we integrated directly Turbonomic with Rapid Infrastructure Automation. Again, I didn't do it because I wanted to do it manually. Now what I can do is go back here. And the first thing I can see is look at this. Now it's updated based on Turbonomic recommendation and the ID of the recommendation. I can click here and this will tell me, look, this is what we changed. The request has been changed from 256 to 512 and the limits from this value to this value. Exactly what Turbonomic had from 256 to 512 and from 1.13 to 1 gig. In a second, as you could see, it took very, very little. We have managed to integrate it. Now from here, I didn't add it, the step, but what we could do is come here and talk to Terraform. So what I would do is go to HashiCorp, go to Terraform integration, and then here basically is execute the playbook that we have. We can imagine that, imagine that this is something like this. I'm not actually Terraform, but imagine this is one. Integrated to make sure that it's implemented. Or actually, maybe what I would do is wait some time. Let's say wait a minute or two or a few seconds just to make sure that everything is updated. Let's say wait 1 minute and then execute the action to actually deploy the integration. So as you can see, integrating tools is very easy. And why is that? Because now, imagine that I know Turbonomic, I know how to work with my clusters, I know how to use with GitHub, but I don't know how to automate all this integration together. In this case, it's very simple. The first thing I do is, okay, I'm using GitHub. So what I will do is go to my GitHub, if I know how to spell it, integration, go to my repos. And then here, what I will do is get the content of the repo. It will be, if I go to for content, it will be get content. That's right here, you can see the documentation. On this content, what I would do is tell which is the owner, the repo I want to do, the path with information. Then I have to decode it because the way that it works is I have to decode it. And once I have to decode it, what you will do is based on the action that comes from Turbonomic. In this case, I only have one, but I can click here and add more actions. What I would do is navigate this file, check if we have the properties, if we have the limits, if we have the requests, if we have the resources, and just simple as that here, update the information. This is going to be the new request value for the memory. This is going to be the new limit value. All these are variables that Turbonomic gave us. Once I have updated that information, what I would do is reformat the information into a format that GitHub understands, and then update the file. As simple as that. This workflow, personally, I built it, and I don't know almost nothing about GitHub. I'm not an expert on any other things. It took me around half an hour. It took me 30 minutes to build. It can take hours, it can take days, it can take weeks to build just this single use case. If you have pressure because you have lots of things to do, you don't have time to learn, you cannot spend 1 week learning how this API works in order to do the integration. You just don't do the integration. You just skip it and you have to keep doing manually, meaning that you will have outages, you have loss of service, but as you don't have the time to spend to learn these things, these new skills, you will not do it. Now, with this solution, with rapid infrastructure automation, we are reducing that time. We are empowering you, the expert in your technologies, to build your own automations. And instead of taking weeks to learn how to automate this, it takes minutes, it takes hours to build this integration, allowing you to deploy new use cases, because we are gonna never automate 100% of our infrastructure. But if we can automate 80% with 20% of the cost, you're gonna have much more time to focus on important things, and obviously also very, very important, you're reducing the outages, you're improving performance, you're removing human error, you're basically making your infrastructure much more resilient. So I hope you guys enjoyed this session. So I think that now what we're gonna do is open up for some questions from the audience. So if you guys have any questions, you can pop it into the chat, or yeah, I'm gonna give you a few seconds, a few minutes. Hey, Dan.
I think there's a couple of questions. Thank you very much, for that. Much appreciated. There was a lot of screens going on there, but I'm glad the level of detail that you went through. So very, very excellent. And there are a couple of questions in the chat room if you would like to take a look over there. Ezial Curtin.
Actually, I don't have the chat open, so if you could read it for me.
Sure, I will read it, not a problem. In the case of deploying virtual machines, was that done in the cloud or VMware? What platform specifically?
Good. So the example that I showed you, it was in the cloud, but it could be in any other platform. So if you have VMware, we have the integration as well, meaning that we can deploy VMs in VMware, in OpenStack, in OpenShift, in Hyper-V, in Nutanix, in any cloud. As long as we have the integration, and we have the integrations for most of them, we can build the VM anywhere. And actually, there are lots of customers that are using this technology, rapid infrastructure automation, for platform migrations. Imagine that you're running in a platform, let's say VMware, and you want to migrate to OpenStack or to a cloud or vice versa. This is a solution that will reduce the risk in this kind of migrations, because you don't have to deploy things manually. You can orchestrate the whole process. You can build workflows and then add these workflows into a bigger workflow that can orchestrate anything. And imagine that in this migration, you're using different technologies. You have a lot of Ansible playbooks for configuration management. You have a lot of Terraform playbooks to deploy the VMs on specific clouds. You can combine all these different playbooks together in a simple workflow along integration with clouds, with OpenShift, with OpenStack, with ServiceNow, with you name it.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Very comprehensive. Also, we have another question. It might be somewhat similar. Also, how does RNA actually integrate with your cloud platform? Like, how does it authenticate?
Sure, well, as simple as let's go here and have a look. So if we want to integrate with clouds, as mentioned, I understand the question is for IBM Cloud. So in order to integrate cloud, as simple as you create the API key, that's all we need to integrate with IBM Cloud. For other clouds, as mentioned, for Amazon, we need the access key and the secret key. For Azure, we would need the tenant, application ID, secret ID, subscription ID. So depending on the cloud, you need more or less details. That these are the typical details that we need in order to access the API. But once this is done, you don't have to bother about if it's basic authentication or token or better token or any other kind of authentication. Just leave our solution, Rapid Infrastructure Automation, to deal with that.
Okay, great. That sounds, perfect. And so I'll actually drop a couple myself, just while we're waiting for the rest of the group, see if they're bold enough to ask some questions. What is the difference, Raul, between rapid infrastructure automation and Ansible and Terraform? We hear a lot about that, and I know some of our users out there are a little bit confused. I'm wondering if you could help shed some light on that for us.
Absolutely. The thing is that there are lots of automation solutions in the market. And actually, even in IBM, we have different solutions like Rapid Infrastructure Automation, Ansible, and now Terraform as well. The thing is that depending on the use case, you will use one or the other. I always say, if you have already Ansible playbooks for configuration management, like deploying IPs, creating new VLANs on network devices, and that's all you need to do, possibly Ansible is going to be the best solution for that. If you want to create immutable infrastructure like in the cloud, that what you want to do is create VM, destroy VM, create it again, possibly Terraform is going to be a good solution. But if you want to do a little bit of everything, and on top of that, integrate with other solutions like OpenShift, OpenStack, ITSM solution like ServiceNow or VM Helix, you want to integrate with other cloud providers because you want to do other things. When you want to do something more, you want to expand what you have. In that case, Rapid Infrastructure Automation is the solution because you don't need to get rid of what you have today. You don't want to get rid of Ansible, which is very good at what it does. You don't want to get rid of Terraform. You want to expand. You want to orchestrate. You want to talk to both platforms at the same time and run automations at the same time. So that's why we consider when you have solutions like Ansible and Terraform, RIA, Rapid Infrastructure Automation, runs as an orchestrator of different technologies in a single workflow.
Great. That's good to know that you don't have to rip and replace. I know a lot of our folks out there and customers, think about that because they're heavy users of Ansible and Terraform, and they say, what am I going to do? So, great question. Hey, so there's another question that came in from SEL Curtin. Seems like he's the only one. I think everyone else is being a little bit shy, but that's okay. I think he's going to get the blue ribbon for today. This question is RNA a cloud-based solution, or is it something that can be deployed in your own space, like on-prem or your cloud instance?
Sure. So it's actually both. It could be deployed as SaaS, or it could be deployed on-prem. And actually, it could be hybrid, where you have the SaaS version and you deploy what we call remote workers in your network. So basically, we are very flexible depending what you want, SaaS, on-prem, or hybrid. We have both solutions. The solution runs in containers, in Kubernetes, so it's very, very easy and very flexible to deploy.
Okay, wonderful, good. And the question that I have is, how is it licensed? A lot of our folks want to know. Seems like it's a little bit different type of licensing mechanism. So how would I go about licensing RIA?
Yeah, actually, it's a great question because the licensing here is somewhat different to other automation solutions. Other automation solutions, the license is based on the number of network elements or infrastructure that they target, or maybe on the number of users that access the platform, or even in the number of executions of the automations. In this case, it's completely different. The way this solution is licensed is in the number of active workflows. And what is an active workflow? If you create a workflow like this one and you don't deploy it, you just run it manually, this is not an active workflow. It's a workflow the same way that you can have hundreds of them that are not licensed, are free. So when a workflow becomes an active workflow, there are three options. The first is that you deploy it as an API endpoint, so third-party tools can execute this workflow remotely, or you schedule it as part of a job and you execute it every day, every week, every hour, wherever you want. Or when you give access to third-party, to other people using the automation center. So if a workflow has an API or is part of a job or is part of the automation center, then becomes an active workflow and you need one license for each active workflow. If a workflow is not an API, is not part of the job, and is not part of the automation center, is not an active workflow, and you can have as many as you want. And you don't pay for the number of executions. You can be executed every second. It's not a problem. It's not based on the number of people with access to the workflows. You can have as many as you want. It doesn't matter how many equipments you are targeting. You can be targeting thousands of thousands. You only pay per active workflow.
That's good to know. It sounds like you have a lot of flexibility in the platform, so that's awesome. So my last question, I don't see any other questions coming in, but if they do come in, I will ask them, is are you saying, Raul, that I can really create my own integrations? I mean, what if I'm a person who doesn't have a lot of skills and, this is kind of frightening to me. Can I really do this? Is it for real?
Yeah, I mean, in this case, in the demos I show, everything was very fast. But in a real situation, it would take much less time than it would take in a normal situation, even if you don't have the skills. And I can talk you about an example. One of my colleagues that works with Turbonomic, we wanted to do some automation with Turbonomic. And the problem is that this guy was not a developer or scripter. He knew a lot about Turbonomic, didn't know anything about anything else. And we're trying to do some automations, and it took almost a year, and he couldn't do it because he didn't have the time to build it. Well, once we showed this solution, in less than 2 hours, he managed to build the automation. And the automation was, I want to check which are the orphan clusters that Turbonomic has targeted, has configured, and delete them. Something very simple. But when you don't have the skills, it looks like something very big. We showed this first time he used it, first time he was interacting with the Turbonomic API, it took 2 hours to build the workflow. So we're talking from a year of no progress whatsoever to in 2 hours managing to fix the problem, to build the automation. So yes, even you, Dan, you will be able to create your own automations.
Oh, that is very good to hear. I liked the way you talked about and showed us just all the flexibility of RIA. You're able to keep your automations, you're able to save them, and to be able to look at them. And of course, it's a nice, wonderful, visually, pleasing, screen. You're able to see actually someone like me could look at us and say, hey, I kind of understand this block. I kind of understand how this works. And if I was looking at an editor, at a programming editor, I'd be like, what is this stuff? So wonderful. Okay, great. Well, that was a wonderful, great conversation. Thank you for all your time, Raul. I know you're usually off somewhere, so we're glad and very fortunate to have you with us today. So obviously, thanks to the participants that asked some questions. And actually, we're out of time. Please attend our office hours at the end of the day for your chance to engage with our panel of speakers. Raul, I believe, is going to be part of that as well. So we're not going to let him go and jet off, immediately. But if you came up with questions, maybe during the session and you were not able to get into the chat, just write them down, bring them with us, bring them with you later so we can discuss and we can delve into them. It's going to kind of be an informal session, so it'll be a good time to delve into maybe topics that would be of interest to you. But before you go, you will most likely see a survey if you haven't seen it already. Please give us some feedback. We do want to know how we can make the most of your time. And plus, if you want to stay connected, join the IBM Tech Exchange community. There's lots of resources there, like the libraries and blogs and templates. They kind of explain kind of how to. It's a really great resource. And just tap the link that you will find in the chat room over there. We hope you stick around, and we look forward to seeing you in the other sessions in this track. See you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.